I refused to let my stepmom walk me down the A, so she left my dad. Now he wants to attend my wedding alone with a confession that changed everything. I'm Lily 28F, and I'm getting married to my fiancé Richard 30M in 3 months. To understand my current situation, I need to go back to my childhood. My parents Claire 53F and Tom 55M met in college and got married young. They had me when they were both 25, and for the first decade of my life, we seemed like the perfect family. I remember weekends spent at the lake house my grandparents owned, where dad would teach me how to fish while mom prepared picnics. We have family game nights every Friday, and my parents would take turns reading me bedtime stories. It wasn't all perfect. They had their arguments like any couple, but I always felt loved and secure. Everything changed when I was 10. Dad started working late more often, and mom seemed increasingly stressed and unhappy. Overheard arguments about someone named Tanya, but I didn't understand what was happening then. One day I came home from school to find mom crying in the kitchen. She sat me down and explained that dad had been having an affair with his coworker Tanya 48 fan, that they were getting a divorce. The next few months were a blur of tears, arguments, and confusion. Dad moved out, and I remember feeling so angry with him for hurting mom and breaking up our family. The divorce was messy and painful. There were heated arguments about custody and property division. I remember sitting outside the courtroom during one of their hearings, feeling lost and scared. In the end, mom got primary custody, with dad having visitation every other weekend. At first, I was reluctant to spend time with dad. I was angry and hurt, and I didn't want to leave mom alone. But mom, despite her own pain, encouraged me to give dad a chance. She told me, your dad made a mistake, but he still loves you. It's okay to love him too. Gradually, I started to enjoy my weekends with dad. He'd take me to the movies, teach me how to cook badly, and we'd have long talks about school and my friends. But things got complicated again when 2 years after the divorce, dad announced he was marrying Tanya. I met Tanya properly for the first time at a dinner dad arranged. She seemed nice enough, bringing me a gift, a journal with my name embossed on it, and asking me about my hobbies. But I couldn't shake the feeling that she was the reason my family had fallen apart after dad and Tanya got married. She tried really hard to bond with me. She was always buying me gifts, clothes, books, art supplies, and suggesting mother-daughter activities like spa days or cooking classes, but her efforts felt forced to me, and I never felt comfortable around her. Part of it was loyalty to my mom, and part of it was that Tanya seemed to be trying too hard to replace mom. As I entered my teenage years, my relationship with dad and Tanya became more strained. They would often make negative comments about mom, saying things like, "It's a shame your mother is so bitter," or "If only your mom could move unlike we have." These comments really bothered me, because I knew how hard mom was trying to co-parent peacefully. My mom, on the other hand, never spoke badly about dad or T in front of me. She would listen when I complained about them, but always encouraged me to give them a chance. They're not perfect, she'd say, but they're trying. It's okay to have different relationships with different people in your life. When I was 16, Tanya got pregnant. Dad was ecstatic, constantly talking about how excited he was to have a real family. Now those words cut deep, because they made me feel like I wasn't enough for him, like I was just a remnant of his old life, rather than a valued part of his new one. Unfortunately, Tanya had a miscarriage at Tony Weeks. It was a difficult time for them, and I remember feeling a mix of sadness for their loss and guilty relief that I wouldn't be replaced by a new baby. Dad told me that Tanya would need extra love and support from me, which put a lot of pressure on me at a time when I was already struggling with typical teenage issues and the ongoing fallout from the divorce. After the miscarriage, Tanya became even more clingy with me. She started introducing me to people as her daughter, which made me incredibly uncomfortable. She also began pressuring me to call her mom, which I flat out refused to do. This led to many arguments with dad, always taking Tanya's side and accusing me of being insensitive to Tanya's feelings. During this time, my relationship with my mom remained strong. She was my rock, always there to listen without judgment and offer support without pushing. She encouraged me to pursue my interests, which led me to join the school newspaper and eventually study journalism in college. It was in college that I met Richard. We were both writing for the university paper, and we bonded over our shared love of investigative reporting. Richard's family background was much simpler than mine. His parents were still happily married, and he had 2 younger siblings. At first, I was hesitant to let him into my complicated family dynamics, but his patience and understanding helped me open up. Now, as we're planning our wedding, all these past issues have come to a head. I've decided to ask my mom to walk me down the aisle. She's been my constant support, my role model, and my best friend when I told Dad. And Tanya about this decision, Tanya burst into tears, and Dad got angry. They said I was being selfish, and that I should let Tanya walk me down the aisle too, since she's been in my life for so long. I refused, saying that my mom is my only mother, and the one I want by my side on my wedding day. This led to a huge argument with Dad, threatening to not attend the wedding of Tanya. Isn't given a special role. He brought up all the times Tanya had tried to be there for me, the gifts she'd bought them, activities she'd planned, but to me, those things pale in comparison to the consistent love and support my mom has given me. Tanya accused me of never giving her a chance, and said that after all these years, she thought of me as her own daughter. She mentioned her miscarriage again, saying how hard it had been to lose a baby and then have her stepdaughter reject her. I understand that the miscarriage was traumatic for her, but I don't think it's fair to use that as emotional leverage against me. I'm standing firm in my decision, but now I'm wondering if I'm being too harsh. Richard supports me completely, saying that it's our wedding and we should do what feels right to us, but some of my extended family members are saying I should compromise to keep the peace. Part of me feels guilty for hurting Tanya's feelings, but a bigger part feels angry that Dad and Tanya are trying to make my wedding about them. I've spent years trying to navigate this blended family situation, often at the expense of my own feelings. I want my wedding day to be a celebration of love, not a battlefield for old family conflicts. Am I the fool refusing to let my stepmother walk me down the aisle? Should I stick to my decision or try to find a compromise? Update 1. It's been a month since my last post, and a lot has happened. First, I want to thank everyone for their supportive comments. They really helped me feel more confident in my decision. After the argument about the wedding, my dad and Tanya stopped talking to me for a couple of weeks. It was a tense time, and I found myself constantly checking my phone, half expecting and half dreading a message from them. Richard was incredibly supportive during this time, reminding me that it was okay to prioritize my own feelings and that I wasn't responsible for managing their emotions. Then out of the blue, Tanya called me crying. She apologized for pressuring me over the years and said she just wanted to be close to me. Her voice sounded genuinely remorseful, and for a moment I felt the glimmer of hope that maybe we could find a way to move forward. She asked if we could meet for coffee to talk things over, and after some hesitation, I agreed, thinking it might be a chance to clear the air before the wedding. We met at a local cafe that I used to frequent during my college years. It felt strange to be sitting across from Tanya in a place that held so many memories of study sessions with friends and early dates. With Richard, at first things seemed to be going well. Tanya was being unusually understanding and even said she respected my decision to have my mom walk me down the aisle. She shared some stories about her own wedding to my dad, how nervous she had been, and how she had wished for a closer relationship with her own stepmother. I found myself softening a bit, seeing her as a person with her own struggles and insecurities rather than just the woman who had broken up my parents' marriage. However, things took a turn when she started talking about how she and my dad were thinking of renewing their vows next year. At first, I thought she was just sharing their plans, but then she dropped a bombshell. She suggested that maybe I could walk her down the aisle at their vow renewal ceremony as a way to balance things out. I was shocked by this suggestion. It felt like she was trying to create a quid pro quo situation, as if my wedding and their vow renewal were somehow equivalent. I told her it wasn't the same thing at all, that a daughter's wedding is a unique event that can't be compared to a vow renewal. Tanya got upset and accused me of never giving her a chance. She brought up the miscarriage again, going into detail about how traumatic it had been and how she had hoped that having a baby would bring our family closer together. She said that losing the baby had been doubly painful because she felt like she had lost her chance to truly be a mother. I tried to be sympathetic, remembering how difficult that time had been for everyone. But I also pointed out that her loss, while tragic, didn't obligate me to see her as my mother. I explained that I had my own complex feelings about that time, how I had felt simultaneously sad for their loss and relieved that I wouldn't be replaced. The conversation quickly deteriorated from there. Tanya accused me of being cold-hearted and ungrateful for all she had tried to do for me over the years. She brought up every gift she had ever given me, every outing she had planned, as if keeping a tally of her attempts at motherhood. I pointed out that relationships aren't built on gifts and forced outings, but on genuine connection and respect for boundaries. In the heat of the moment, I said something I had been holding back for years. I told Tanya that while I was sorry for her loss, I was tired of her using the miscarriage as emotional leverage. I said that it wasn't fair to place the burden of her unfulfilled maternal desires on me. especially when I was just a teenager trying to cope with my own family trauma. Tanya burst into tears and stormed out of the cafe, leaving me sitting there feeling a mix of guilt, anger, and relief at having finally expressed my true feelings. As I sat there trying to process what had just happened, I couldn't help but think about how this cafe, once a place of happy memories, would now always be associated with this painful confrontation. Later that evening, my dad called me furious. He said I had been cruel to Tanya and that I owed her an apology. He accused me of being selfish and ungrateful, saying that Tanya had only ever wanted to love me. When I tried to explain my side of things, he interrupted me, saying that if I couldn't accept Tanya as my mother, then maybe I shouldn't consider him my father anymore. Those words hit me hard. Despite all our issues over the years, I had never doubted that my dad loved me, but in that moment, it felt like he was choosing Tanya over me, just as he had done all those years ago when he left our family for her. I'm hurt and angry, but I'm also feeling more certain than ever about my decision. Richard has been incredibly supportive through all of this, holding me when I cry and assuring me that I have every right to set boundaries. We're moving forward with our wedding plans, focusing on creating a day that celebrates our love and the family we're building together. My mom has been amazing too. When I told her about what happened, she listened without judgment and offered comfort without trying to influence my decisions. She reminded me that family relationships are complex and that it's okay to prioritize my own emotional well-being. After a few days of reflection, I've decided to send my dad a final message. In it, I plan to explain my feelings and boundaries. Clearly, I want to make it clear that while I'm willing to have a relationship with them, it needs to be on terms that respect my feelings and my relationship with my mom. I'll let them know that if they can't accept that, then they won't be welcome at the wedding. As I sit here drafting this message, I can't help but feel a mix of sadness and resolution. It's not the relationship I wished I could have with my dad and stepmom, but it's the healthiest one I can offer right now. Am I doing the right thing, or am I being too harsh and potentially cutting them out of this important day in my life? Update to another month has passed, and things have gotten even more complicated after I sent the message to my dad and Tanya explaining my feelings and boundaries. I didn't hear back from them for a couple of weeks. The silence was both a relief and a source of anxiety. I tried to focus on wedding preparations, finalizing the menu, having dress fittings with my mom, and working on our vows with Richard, but the unresolved situation with my dad and Tanya was always there in the back of my mind. Then last Saturday, my dad showed up at my apartment unannounced. I was in the middle of addressing invitations with Richard when the doorbell rang. Opening the door to find my dad standing there looking tired and upset was a shock. I invited him in more out of surprise than anything else. Richard, sensing the tension, excused himself to give us some privacy, but not before squeezing my hand reassuringly. As soon as we were alone, Dad broke down. He told me that Tanya had left him apparently after our coffee shop confrontation, and my message. Tanya had a breakdown. She told my dad that she couldn't handle the rejection anymore and that she needed to find herself. She packed her bags and went to stay with her sister in another state. As I listened to my dad pour out his heart, I felt a whirlwind of emotions. Part of me felt vindicated. Hadn't I been saying for years that T's attachment to me was unhealthy? But another part of me felt guilty. Had my refusal to accept her as a mother figure really caused this much pain? Dad was a mess, alternating between apologizing to me and blaming me for Tanya leaving. He said he didn't know how to fix things and asked if I would consider family therapy with him and Tanya. The idea made me uncomfortable. I told him I wasn't ready for that, especially since Tanya had left him and I wasn't even sure where we all stood then. My dad dropped another bombshell. He confessed that years ago, when Tanya had her miscarriage, they had actually been trying for a baby because Tanya felt it would make me accept her more as a mother figure. He'd admitted that they had been wrong to try to replace me, force a mother-daughter relationship. I was stunned by this revelation. It explains so much about their behavior over the years: the increased pressure to bond with Tanya, the constant comparisons to it. Real family, the guilt tripping after the miscarriage, but it also made me angry. I felt like I had been manipulated, that my feelings had been disregarded in their quest to create their ideal family. I told my dad I needed time to process everything and asked him to leave. As I closed the door behind him, I felt overwhelmed. Called my mom, needing her calm presence and wise advice. She listened patiently as I recounted everything, then suggested that I take some time to really think about what I want my relationship with my dad and Tanya to look like going forward. Now, I'm feeling conflicted. On one hand, I feel vindicated in my decision to keep boundaries with Tanya. Her leaving my dad seems to confirm that her attachment to me was more about her own needs than about genuine care for me. On the other hand, I feel bad for her. My dad, who seems genuinely remorseful and lost Richard, thinks I should maintain my boundaries, but perhaps be open to rebuilding a relationship with my dad over time. He pointed out that my dad's confession about the pregnancy attempt, while painful to hear, was also a step towards honesty that we hadn't seen before. My mom, when I told her what happened, was surprisingly sympathetic towards my dad. She said that people can make big mistakes when they're desperate for love and acceptance. She reminded me of how young my dad was when they had me, and how he might have been trying to recreate the family life he felt he had lost. The wedding is now just a month away, and I'm not sure what to do about my dad's invitation. Should I still invite him, giving him a chance to be part of this important day? Should I try to reach out to Tanya now that I know more about her motivations, or should I focus on my own happiness and let them sort out their issues? As I sit here looking at the stack of unsent invitations, I realize that this decision is about more than just the wedding. It's about what kind of relationship I want with my dad going forward, and whether there's any place for Tanya in my life. It's about balancing compassion with self-protection and figuring out what forgiveness looks like in a situation where the wounds run so deep. Update 3. The wedding was last weekend, and I wanted to give a final update on how everything turned out. After much consideration and many long talks with Richard and my mom, I decided to keep my dad's invitation to the wedding open, but I made it clear that it was just for him, not Tanya. I wrote him a long email explaining my decision. I told him that while I was willing to work on our relationship, it would take time, and I needed him to respect my boundaries. I also expressed that I hoped he would come to the wedding to celebrate this important day in my life, but I would understand if he felt he couldn't attend without Tanya. To my surprise, my dad accepted these terms. He replied to my email apologizing again for everything and saying he wanted to be there for me on my wedding day. He also mentioned that he and Tanya were still separated, and that he was starting to realize how much their relationship had affected me over the years. The week before the wedding was a whirlwind of last-minute preparations. My mom was a constant source of support, helping with everything from flower arrangements to calming my pre-wedding jitters. Richard's family arrived from out of town, and seeing how easily they got along with my mom made me feel grateful for the loving, drama-free family I was marrying into. On the wedding day itself, I was a bundle of nerves and excitement as my mom helped me into my dress. We both got a bit teary-eyed. She told me how proud she was of a woman I'd become and how happy she was that Richard and I had found each other. It was a moment I'll cherish forever. The ceremony was beautiful. Walking down the aisle with my mom by my side felt absolutely perfect. I saw my dad sitting in one of the front rows, looking emotional, but managing a smile when our eyes met. Richard's face when he saw me coming down the aisle was everything I had dreamed of, and more. During the reception, I was busy greeting guests and enjoying the celebration with Richard, but I did notice my dad looking a bit sad and lonely at times. However, he put on a brave face whenever he caught me looking. To my surprise, he even had a civil conversation with my mom at one point. They were never going to be friends, but seeing them be able to be in the same room without tension was a relief. After the wedding, when things had calmed down a bit, my dad and I had a long talk. He apologized again for everything and said he wanted to try to be a better father. He admitted that he had made a lot of mistakes, particularly in trying to force a relationship between Tanya and me. He also told me that Tanya had decided to stay with her sister indefinitely and that they were considering a trial separation. I'm cautiously optimistic about rebuilding my relationship with my dad. We've agreed to start with monthly dinners, just the two of us, to reconnect without any pressure. It won't be easy, and there's a lot of hurt to work through, but I'm willing to try. As for Tanya, I decided not to reach out for now. I think we both need time and space to heal and move forward. Maybe someday we'll be able to have a conversation about everything that happened. But for now, I'm focusing on my new life with Richard and on rebuilding my relationship with my dad. This whole experience has been a roller coaster, but I'm glad I stood my ground. I'm starting my married life with a clearer understanding of my family dynamics and stronger boundaries. The wedding turned out to be not just a celebration of my love for Richard, but also a new beginning for my relationship with my parents. Richard and I are now settling into married life, and it feels wonderful to face the future together, knowing we can handle whatever comes our way. We replanning a belated honeymoon for next month. a trip to Japan that we're both excited about. Thank you to everyone who supported me through this journey. Your advice and encouragement helped me navigate this difficult situation and start this new chapter of my life on a positive note.